Now that we have a lot of people using Zoom, I have questions coming in about how do we use the webinars. So I thought I would do a short series about that, but first I want to start with what is a webinar? What's the difference between a webinar and a meeting? So if you create a regular meeting in Zoom, your participants can pretty easily participate with being able to turn on their microphone, turn on their camera. That is not the case within a webinar. So when a participant connects to a webinar, they can just participate usually through Q&A. Okay, there is also a feature, of course, chat is built into it, but you can turn the chat feature off. And I suggest using one or the other because it's easier to follow one or the other and not both of them when you're trying to manage a webinar. So I like to just turn on the Q&A. As participants have questions, they can put those questions in there and you can move over questions to answered so that you can keep better track of what's going on within the webinar. The other thing to think about is the participants can request the microphone, so you can let them know that, and there is a way that you as the host can then give them access to the microphone. So let's take a look real quick at how to set up a webinar. So I'm just going to sign into my Zoom account here. And there is a webinars category over here on the left-hand column. So I need to click on webinars here first, and then I need to schedule a webinar. Okay, so I can name my webinar, describe it, say when it is, the duration of it. If it's a recurring webinar, so if you have a recurring event you want to use webinars for, you can actually use the recurring in here as well. Okay, and then do you want to require registration for your webinar? So you can require that everybody registers before that they enter the webinar, and that's kind of a nice thing because then it's like having an attendance record for that webinar. Okay, you can also require a passcode, so it's up to you depending on what kind of authority you want to have with that webinar, right? You also can say if it's going to be something just within the university, you can say that only authenticated users can join. Okay, but remember, if you have a speaker or someone else outside the university, that's not really going to work for you. So something to think about. My favorite webinar option is to enable this Q&A. So it allows that question and answer thing to be sort of streamlined, and I enjoy that more than chat. Okay, and then down here at the bottom you'll see that when you schedule the webinar, and of course you could record the webinar automatically if you want to, but when you schedule it, then you get access down here to different settings. Okay, so I can invite attendees and I can attendees and use this link to do so. Okay, and you can copy an invitation that's already sort of created here for you. It looks like this and has all the Zoom connection information you would possibly need. You can also go into here and say, oh, I want to set up polls for my webinar. Okay, so if you want to do polling questions during a webinar, you still have that ability. Here's the Q&A function. So within Q&A, you can decide what your Q&A is going to allow. Okay, so you can just hit the little edit over here and decide which functions you want the attendees to be able to do within that Q&A category. All right, there's some other settings down here, but that is the basics of it. So just know that when you're setting up a webinar, you're doing it in a different place than when you're setting up a regular meeting. You also have to request webinar access. Okay, so if it doesn't show up in your account, then you're going to want to reach out to ITS, put in a ticket, and say I would like access to webinars. You know, and I really only recommend them for special events. For the most part, I think meetings work really, really well, but there are some things that I think webinars are really appropriate for. Okay, so please feel free to reach out to me if you want more information on this. I'll do a couple other recordings that dig into things like how do you control a webinar when you're in there, right, as the host. But CassidyH at uidaho.edu if you have any questions about webinars. Thanks.